Hello, everyone. Today we are going to explore a chilling story from British Columbia, a province known for its stunning natural beauty and diverse culture. However, in this peaceful land, a serial murder case sent shockwaves throughout Canada. This story not only left the entire nation stunned, but also served as a profound wake-up call regarding society's indifference to the less fortunate. Let's dive deep into the case of the pig farm butcher, Robert Pickton, to better understand the nature of his crimes and the value of justice. On February 5th, 2002, a Tuesday, local police received a tip about illegal firearms. It was reported that a farm in Coquitlam Harbor was suspected of storing illegal guns. Canada enforces a very strict gun control system. Every firearm must be registered, and the conditions for legally using a gun are extremely stringent. Upon receiving the tip, the police immediately obtained a search warrant and headed to the suspected farm for a surprise inspection. When they arrived, they discovered that the owner was not present. The officers presented the warrant to the housekeeper and then conducted a thorough search. The farm was enormous, covering more than 150,000 square meters, roughly the size of 20 football fields, and was primarily used as a pig farm with an on-site slaughterhouse. Next to the pig facility stood a trailer used by the owner as his residence. During their search, the police discovered illegal firearms. Even more shockingly, they found evidence suggesting that the farm owner was not only involved in the illegal storage of firearms, but was also suspected of murder. The officers uncovered a large number of women's clothes and pieces of jewelry scattered around the property. Judging by their sizes, it was clear that these items did not belong to one single person. The owner's girlfriend told the police that the clothes and jewelry were not hers. She also revealed that, although the owner was unmarried, he frequently brought women to the farm for overnight stays. Among the garments, some were stained with heavy amounts of blood. In the trailer, the police found a prescription asthma inhaler. Testing revealed that the DNA on it matched that of a recently missing woman. This evidence raised suspicions that the owner was involved in more than just illegal firearm possession, that he might also be connected to the disappearance of the woman. With this preliminary evidence in hand, the police obtained another search warrant and the following day returned to the farm for a more detailed examination to determine if the owner was connected to the missing woman's case. During this subsequent search, the officers discovered a set of binding tools in a travel bag. Inside the trailer, they also recovered DNA from 4 other women. Their remains had been found within a 70-meter radius of the trailer. Autopsy reports revealed that all 4 women had sustained obvious external injuries. Due to the deterioration of the bodies, the cause of death for 3 of the victims could not be determined. Only one victim's death was clearly attributed to a gunshot. Although the times of death varied, each victim had been dead for at least 3 days. In 3 of the 4 cases, the bodies had been dismembered with unusually clean, cross-sectional cuts, resembling the way animals are slaughtered. The investigation soon identified the farm owner as Robert Pickton. Moreover, DNA found on the binding tools matched his. In the trailer's laundry area, the police discovered a revolver whose caliber matched that of the gun used to kill one of the female victims. Notably, the revolver was missing 1 bullet. In fact, these 4 women were not the only ones reported missing in recent times. Since the 1980s, East Vancouver had been home to many immigrants who were not of British descent. In stark contrast to the prosperity of West Vancouver, East Vancouver was relatively chaotic and impoverished. At that time, drugs, prostitution, and other social vices were rampant. Some women, after falling into drug addiction, were forced to sell their bodies to earn money for more drugs. Recently, the Vancouver police had received numerous reports of missing prostitutes and drug addicts, most of whom were women. The owner of the asthma inhaler found on the farm turned out to be one of these missing women. Because investigators found a multitude of personal belongings and the remains of missing women on Robert's farm, he was officially arrested by police just 1 week later. After his arrest, Robert remained unnervingly calm. Since the police had discovered firearms on the farm, he readily admitted to illegally possessing them, but he flatly denied any involvement with the missing women. Despite prolonged interrogation, he stayed composed and provided no useful information to the authorities. Observing his demeanor, the police decided to employ special tactics. They arranged for an officer who had never met Robert before to don a prisoner's uniform and share a cell with him, hoping that a change in environment might prompt him to reveal more details. To everyone's surprise, this method worked. Once confined, Robert dropped his guard completely. Treating the undercover officer as a fellow inmate, he began excitedly recounting the details of his crimes. Robert confessed that he had lured these women to his East Vancouver farm, engaged in sexual relations with them in the trailer, and then proceeded to kill them, disposing of their bodies on the premises. What followed horrified his cellmate even more. Robert claimed that he had murdered 49 women and was just one short of reaching his goal of 50. He expressed regret that his carelessness had led to his capture. Little did he know that every word was being recorded by cameras. Soon after, the police identified Robert as the prime suspect in the murders. 8 days after his arrest, authorities confirmed the identities of 2 of the women found on the farm by comparing their DNA. And Robert was subsequently charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The suspect, Robert Pickton, 53 years old, was the second child in his family. He had an older sister named Linda and a younger brother named David. The Pickton family had a long tradition of pig farming. It was already in its 4th generation. Robert's grandfather had purchased a plot of land adjacent to a mental hospital in Coquitlam Harbor and established a pig farm. In the late 1950s, specifically at the end of 1950, the government expropriated the farm's land in order to build the Lougheed Highway, forcing the Pickton family to relocate. In 1963, when Robert was 14, his parents purchased the land for the current farm for $18,000. At that time, the area was still a desolate, swampy region. The family of 4 moved there, built a house, rebuilt the pig farm, and continued their livestock business. Robert's sister, Linda, did not live with them because their parents believed that a daughter should not be raised in a pig farming household. Consequently, Linda was sent to live with a relative in Vancouver. Growing up on the farm, Robert had plenty of pork to eat, yet his parents worked extremely hard every day to manage the farm's operations. Since the farm was the family's main source of income, his father prioritized work over his children. When busy, he would frequently have Robert and David help feed the pigs and clean the premises, yet he rarely paid attention to their personal hygiene. As a result, Robert and David often went to school in dirty, manure-stained clothes, causing their peers to avoid them and even go out of their way to steer clear. They were mockingly nicknamed the Stinking Pigs, which contributed to Robert's growing disinterest in school, and his academic performance suffered. After failing an exam in 2nd grade, Robert was transferred to a special education class. Both at home and at school, he received little genuine care, leaving him feeling profoundly isolated. At age 12, Robert raised a calf that he treated as a pet, confiding in it regularly. Although the calf couldn't understand him, having a companion provided the boy with some comfort. However, 2 weeks after getting the calf, Robert returned home from school to find it missing. Deeply worried, he asked his mother if she had seen it. She advised him to check the storage shed, where he sadly discovered that the calf had been slaughtered. Heartbroken by this loss, Robert never kept a pet again. When Robert was 14, coinciding with the family's move to the current farm, he dropped out of school and began working as a butcher at a local pork shop. This continued for 7 years, and by the age of 21, he left his job to return home and help manage the family's pig farm. 8 years after his return, Robert's father died of an illness, and a year later his mother passed away as well. The three siblings then convened to discuss the division of their parents' estate. Linda inherited a portion of the assets and shares in the farm, while David received the house and a share of the farm's equity. Neither Linda nor David liked the farm. They considered it filthy and odorous. Since Robert had grown up on the farm, management of the farm and its pigs was left in his hands. Lacking a house of his own, Robert continued to live in a trailer parked next to the farm. With the economic development of Coquitlam Harbor, the farm's value increased significantly. By 1994, when Robert was 45, the farm was valued at 7.2 million Canadian dollars, 400 times its original price. That fall, a portion of the land was sold to a villa development company for 1.7 million Canadian dollars. In the same year, the Coquitlam city government purchased another part of the farm for 1.2 million Canadian dollars to build a park, and the following year they bought an additional section for 2.3 million Canadian dollars to construct Blackburn Elementary School. Since all three siblings held shares in the farm, the proceeds from these sales were divided among them according to their share percentages. This windfall suddenly provided David with a substantial sum of money. He moved out of the farm and began living alone in Burnaby, about 2 kilometers away. Although David relocated, he retained ownership of the house. Thus, Robert continued to live in his trailer on the farm. Living alone on the expansive property, he managed the operation by himself, raising piglets until they were ready for slaughter, then selling the pork at the market. Although the farm was equipped with specialized slaughtering facilities, it could not process the pig's offal. Robert would frequently drive the offal to a waste processing plant located in downtown Vancouver, about 30 kilometers away. In East Vancouver, Robert was exposed to a completely different world. At night, the streets shone with colorful lights, and many women dressed in flashy clothing stood on the sidewalks soliciting customers. These women were prostitutes selling their bodies to survive. Robert interacted with some of them and soon realized that they were often addicts. With a little money or heroin, they were willing to follow him. Consequently, Robert began regularly visiting East Vancouver to lure these women to his farm. One year after David left the farm, he and Robert registered a non-profit charitable organization called the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. This organization claimed to represent various service organizations, sports clubs, and other reputable groups, and it also coordinated and managed special events, such as dance performances and exhibitions. In reality, the organization frequently hosted parties at the farm, where the two brothers provided free drinks and roasted pork to the attendees. However, these gatherings were not merely acts of charity. Their primary purpose was to attract prostitutes. In time, this method proved unsustainable. Robert eventually abandoned these public events as a means to recruit women and switched to luring women directly from East Vancouver to his home. In fact, this was not the first time Robert had run into legal trouble. In 1997, at the age of 48, Robert was charged with attempted murder. That year, a woman named Wendy encountered him in East Vancouver. Robert seduced her with money and heroin, and she agreed to go with him to the farm. However, she had no idea that Robert harbored a peculiar fetish for BDM and violent sexual behavior. He often demanded that his partners play the role of the abused, while he would use violence or various instruments to torture them. Among the items later recovered at the farm was a set of binding tools, one of the implements used for such abuse. Once they reached the trailer, Robert handcuffed Wendy. Completely caught off guard, Wendy soon realized that Robert was a pervert, and fearing further harm, she resolutely refused his demands and prepared to leave. In response, Robert immediately restrained her further. Spotting a knife on a nearby table, Wendy grabbed it in self-defense and attempted to stab him. However, due to a disparity in physical strength, Robert quickly wrested control of the knife. As he became injured and began bleeding profusely, Wendy managed to escape outside. At that moment, a car happened to pass by, and Wendy shouted for help. A compassionate driver stopped and took her away from the farm. During the ensuing struggle, both Wendy and Robert were injured by the knife. They were subsequently taken to the same hospital for treatment. Fortunately, Wendy managed to alert the police in time. At the hospital, officers found a pair of handcuffs in Robert's coat pocket, the key to which could also unlock the cuffs on Wendy's wrist. The police confiscated the clothes and rubber boots Robert had worn that night as evidence. He was then arrested and charged with attempted murder. Later, he was released on bail after posting 2,000 Canadian dollars. Because Wendy was a prostitute and severely addicted, her testimony was considered unreliable, and as a result, Robert was not legally punished for the incident. Clearly, women like Wendy face dangers that threaten not only their physical safety, but their very lives. By the end of the 20th century, many women in East Vancouver began to disappear repeatedly. However, since most of these women were prostitutes or addicts from society's lower classes, they received little attention. Moreover, because these women were often transient, no one knew whether they had truly vanished or merely moved to continue their trade elsewhere. As the number of missing women increased and as commonalities emerged, the Vancouver police began to suspect that these were not isolated incidents, but that a serial killer was targeting them. A man named Bill even reported to the police that he had once worked at Robert's farm and described it as an eerie place. Bill recalled that Robert was a quiet, peculiar individual who frequently brought unknown women home for overnight stays. At times, Robert's odd behavior even led others to suspect that he was using heroin. Bill firmly believed that Robert was a murderer and could be linked to the recent disappearances. Acting on this tip, the police began to secretly monitor Robert instead of taking immediate action, noting his frequent visits to the red light district in East Vancouver. This pattern made him a prime suspect, though at that time they still lacked sufficient evidence. Despite months of investigation, the missing persons cases had not advanced. 2 years after the Wendy incident, the Vancouver police announced a reward of 100,000 Canadian dollars, approximately $69,050 at current exchange rates, for anyone who could provide information related to the case. However, even as the reward was publicized, more women in Vancouver continued to vanish. Some officers speculated that these were not mere disappearances. One officer boldly hypothesized that this was the work of a serial killer, meaning that the perpetrator might still be at large. The police then decided to focus their investigation on prostitutes working in Vancouver's red light district. During this process, one prostitute immediately recognized Robert in a photograph and recalled that he had approached her a few days earlier. She stated that when she hesitated, Robert suddenly became aggressive and threatened, "If you dare refuse me, I'll beat you up." The sinister smile on his face as he uttered those words sent shivers down her spine. She described it as if he intended to devour her in a wicked manner, a memory she could never shake. However, this testimony alone was not enough to definitively link Robert to the missing women, and the police required further evidence. 2 months after the reward was posted, the well-known American television program, American Most Wanted, aired a report on the missing women cases in Canada. The case received widespread public attention, and under mounting pressure, the reward was increased from 100,000 Canadian dollars to 200,000 Canadian dollars, about 138,740 US dollars at current exchange rates. With this generous bounty, the police received a tip that there was a refrigerator filled with human meat on Robert's farm. When they went to the farm to question him, Robert refused to let them in, citing that, without a proper search warrant, they had no right to enter. 5 years later, as the number of missing women continued to climb, The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and Vancouver Police collaborated to form a special task force dedicated to investigating these disappearances. Although the police continued to suspect Robert, they still had not found sufficient grounds to search his farm. Months after the task force was established, the police received a report alleging that Robert was suspected of storing illegal firearms on his property. Although this report was not directly related to the missing women cases, the authorities saw it as an opportunity to finally search Robert's farm. On February 5, 2002, the police executed a surprise raid on the farm. As expected, they not only discovered illegal firearms, but also uncovered numerous personal belongings and the remains of missing women. This raid ultimately exposed the largest serial murder case in Canadian history. 4 months after Robert's arrest, the police returned to the farm for an extensive search, hoping to uncover additional evidence of the victims. Given that the crimes spanned many years, the victims' bodies might have decomposed, been reduced to skeletal remains, or even been partially devoured by animals on the property. There were even rumors that Robert had dismembered the victims' bodies, ground them up, and mixed the remains with pork from the farm to sell. The residents of Coquitlam Harbor were utterly terrified upon hearing such rumors. The police deployed heavy equipment, including 2 15-meter conveyor belts, to ensure that no corner of the sprawling farm was overlooked. The sheer size of the property made the search extremely challenging and time-consuming. It took 1.5 years to complete. In total, they collected 60,000 samples from the scene and uncovered approximately 80 unidentified DNA profiles, both male and female. The investigation cost around 7 million Canadian dollars, roughly $4,944,100 US at current exchange rates. Over that 1.5-year period, the police gradually identified more of the victims and continued to add charges against Robert. They also revisited Wendy's case from 5 years earlier, meeting with her again to secure her testimony and to collect the clothes and rubber boots Robert had worn that night, which had been stored at the police station. Later, tests revealed DNA from 2 missing women on Robert's clothing. 3 years after his arrest, the number of first-degree murder charges facing Robert had climbed to 27. In January 2006, 4 years after his arrest, Robert was formally charged with the murder of 27 women. His trial was held at the Supreme Court of British Columbia, where he pleaded not guilty. 2 months later, due to insufficient evidence, the prosecutors withdrew 1 charge, reducing the total number of charges to 26. After more than 6 months of preliminary hearings, and based on the evidence presented by both sides for each charge, the judge divided the 26 charges into 2 groups. One group of 6 charges and another of 20 charges. Because the government had imposed a media blackout on the case, certain details were not fully disclosed. The judge explained that trying all 26 charges simultaneously would have overburdened the jury, potentially extending the trial for more than 2 years and increasing the risk of a wrongful verdict. Since the evidence for the first 6 charges was significantly different from that for the remaining 20, the court decided to try the 6 charges first. A year later, the trial for these 6 charges officially commenced, and the media blackout was lifted, allowing some details of the case to be made public. At trial, the prosecutor described the condition in which some of the female victims were found. For example, one victim's body had been discarded in a garbage bag. Her blood-soaked clothing was recovered from the trailer, and the bones and teeth of another woman were found in the slaughterhouse, presumably left behind by Robert after processing her body. Part of yet another woman's remains was found in a dumpster at the slaughterhouse. These horrifying details demonstrated the brutality of Robert's crimes. The police also recovered a .22 caliber revolver from the farm that had been loaded and fired. Oddly, a phallic object was affixed to the barrel of the gun, which had been discharged once. Robert claimed that he had used the object as a makeshift suppressor when shooting pigs. In addition, the authorities found several boxes of handgun ammunition, 2 pairs of handcuffs, night vision goggles, and aphrodisiacs. Throughout the trial, a total of 128 witnesses took the stand. Among them was a woman named Lynn, who once worked at Robert's farm. She testified that one day, Robert drove her to Vancouver. On the way back to the farm, an unknown woman boarded the car. Robert bought drugs and shared them with this stranger. Once they arrived at the farm, Lynn returned to her private room while the unknown woman accompanied Robert into the trailer. In the middle of the night, Lynn awoke and noticed that the lights in the slaughterhouse were still on, even though she distinctly remembered turning them off in the early evening. Driven by curiosity, she went to check the slaughterhouse and was confronted with a scene that would haunt her for life. She saw Robert, his back turned toward the door, bending over as he manipulated something. Then she witnessed the body of the unknown woman hanging from hooks on the wall, blood streaming down her form. Terrified of potential revenge and fearing for her own life, Lynn did not dare report what she had seen to the police. After nearly 4 years of trial proceedings, the jury ultimately found Robert not guilty on the 6 first-degree murder charges, but he was convicted on 6 second-degree murder charges. The Supreme Court of British Columbia sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years, the maximum penalty available for second-degree murder. Following the trial, both the defense and prosecution appealed the verdict. A year and a half later, the British Columbia Court of Appeal delivered its verdict on the defendant's appeal, rejecting it and upholding the original sentence. Concerning the prosecution's appeal, the appellate court noted that there had been some procedural errors during the preliminary trial, such as the improper exclusion of certain evidence and the division of the 26 charges into 2 groups, but ultimately set aside those findings, leaving the preliminary trial's outcome intact. One day after the Court of Appeal's decision, the defendant continued his appeal by taking the case to the Supreme Court of Canada. A year later, the Supreme Court of Canada rejected his appeal and upheld the verdict. In addition, Robert still faces 20 other pending murder charges. However, immediately after the Supreme Court's decision, British Columbia judicial officials declared that they would not prosecute any further charges against him, as additional convictions would not result in a harsher sentence. Moreover, trying the remaining 20 charges would have required an enormous expenditure of manpower and financial resources. The government of British Columbia announced that the total cost of the investigation and trial had reached 102 million Canadian dollars, roughly 70,357,000 US dollars at current exchange rates. With that, the investigation into Robert's related cases was officially closed. In May 2013, the children of the victims filed a civil lawsuit against the Vancouver Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, alleging that these agencies had failed to protect the victims. A year later, both parties reached a settlement in which each victim's child would receive 50,000 Canadian dollars in compensation, approximately 34,525 US dollars at current exchange rates, though the police were not held liable. In 2016, 9 years after Robert's conviction, a book claiming to be his autobiography was published. According to the account, Robert had given his manuscript to a fellow inmate, who then forwarded it to Michael Chilliwack, a retired construction worker, for editing and publication. The book sparked immediate controversy and was quickly withdrawn from circulation. Today, Robert is 75 years old. He has spent 17 years in prison and will continue to serve out the remainder of his life behind bars. The case of Robert Pickton stands as a dark chapter in Canadian history, leaving behind an irreparable pain for the victims' families and haunting society as a whole. Yet, from these tragedies, we also learn valuable lessons about compassion and our collective responsibility. The unfortunate women were not merely victims of a murderer. They have become symbols of injustice and neglect. Let's work together to change this. Each of us can contribute to building a fairer society, a society where no one is left behind. If you witness any suspicious behavior, speak up. If you see someone in need of help, extend your hand. Justice is not solely the responsibility of the legal system, it is a duty for all of us. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you found this content meaningful, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to spread these invaluable lessons. See you in the next video. Goodbye.